Good day everyone, my name is Christine K. Ubal-ubal and I am here today along with my group mates Emeline Unduran, Jeremy Verdita, and Ranel Tuto to discuss with you the assessment strategies and tools for special and inclusive education. It also included the varied learning resources and instructional coordination for learners with special needs.
At the end of this module, the learners will be able to demonstrate knowledge of differentiated assessment strategies that are responsive to the needs and strengths of diverse learners. Demonstrate knowledge in the implementation of relevant and responsive learning programs. Demonstrate knowledge and understanding to suit the learner's needs. Demonstrate knowledge of teaching strategies that are inclusive of learners from indigenous groups, and demonstrate understanding of the special educational needs of learners in difficult circumstances, including geographic isolation, chronic illness, displacement due to armed conflict, urban resettlement or disasters, child abuse and child labor practices.
Assessment Strategies and Tools Observation Checklist or OCL. An observation checklist is a list of things that an observer is going to look at when observing a class. This list may have been prepared by the observer or the teacher or pwede po sila duha. Ang observation checklist is gina-allow sa mga teachers to record information quickly about how students perform in relation to specific outcomes from the program of studies.
Observation checklist, also written in a yes or no format, can be used to assist in observing student performance related to specific criteria.
They may be directed toward observation of an individual or group. These tools can also include spaces for brief comments, which provide additional information not captured in the checklist.
Ayha gamiton ang observation checklist, dapat ipasabot sa mga estudyante what information will be gathered ug unsaon ni siya paggamit. Ug dapat ang checklist are dated to provide a record or observations over a period of time. A teacher observation checklist is used by school administrators to evaluate the overall performance and teaching strategies of the educator.
These are the common observation checklist items include:
conduct an observation check on different key areas such as planning, teaching techniques, and student-teacher relationships. Add detailed notes or comments, add comments and recommendations. And last but not the least, complete the checklist by capturing electronic signatures of the instructor and observer. Tips on how to use observation checklist.
Good evening everyone, I am one of the virtual teachers for tonight. I am Emily Unduran and I will be discussing the two types of assessment strategies and tools, which is the anecdotal records and portfolios. Let us discuss the anecdotal records first. Anecdotal or progress notes are objective, written a description of observed performance and behavior of students. They are the factual description of the meaningful incidents and events that the teachers has observed while dealing students. What is an anecdotal record? An anecdotal record is used to record specific observations of individual students' behavior, skills, and attitude as they relate to the outcomes in the program of study. So, this assessment strategies derives its meaning and origin from the word anecdotes, which means brief events and episodes. So, it is a record of some significant episodes in the life of students that sheds light on the conduct, thinking skills, and capabilities, revealing significant feature and characteristic of their personality. What are the purpose of having these assessment strategies for the teacher? So, we have four purpose of these anecdotal notes or records. The first one is provide information regarding a student's development over a period of time. Second, provide ongoing records about individual instructional needs. Third, capture observation of significant behaviors that might otherwise be lost. And fourth, provide ongoing documentation of learning that may be shared with students, parents, and teachers during the conference program. So let us now discuss the tips for establishing and maintaining anecdotal notes. So the first steps is the keep a binder with separate page for each student. So in your binder, include the names of the students and don't forget to write the date and every time you put your observations as for you to not make mistake on writing the comments. The next is keep a binder with dividers for each students and that binder should be columned into 3 columns so that the date and events or activities, observations, and the action plan of your observations on how you should address the behavior of your students. And the next one is keep notes brief and focused. So as much as possible, your comments should compose of I think one sentence only to make it easy to understand. The next steps is to keep comments objective. So your comment should be specific, especially when you are handling students with disabilities. Next, record your observations as the events as happening to make the exact note and not to end up with a pile of notes but no idea who they were about and belongs. The next is record comment regularly. So if possible, your records will be regular so that you can create a record of your child's learning and progress over a period of time. Next, record at different activities and events to develop a balanced profile for students' learning. The next, review your records and share anecdotal notes with students and parents to let them know the progress of the child and what are the actions they need to do to assist the child or students' behaviors, attitudes that is difficult by the teacher to handle. Collection of students' work that can exhibit their efforts, progress, and achievements in various areas of the curriculum. So, physical structure of a portfolio refers to the actual arrangement of the work samples, which can be organized according to chronology, subject area, style, or goal area. So, what is a portfolio? A portfolio is a purposeful collection of students' work samples, student self-assessment, and goal assessment that reflect students' progress. So it is a powerful tool that allows students to see their academic progress from grade to grade. These tools encourage students to set goals regarding what has been accomplished and what needs to be done in the future to sustain their achievements. And a portfolio provides an opportunity for students to reflect on their learning, to self-assess, and formulate a deeper understanding of the concepts they are learning beyond a simple surface explanations. For us to have an effective portfolio, we should follow this one. Update regularly to keep them as current and complete as possible. Help students examine their progress. Help students develop a positive self-concept as learners. Shared with parents and guardians. Planned, organized collection. So I think this ends my discussion about the assessment strategies and tools, which is the anecdotal records and portfolios. So the next topic would be discussed by Ms. Verdida.
More than ever, School personnel are responsible for providing high-quality instructions to all students. Unfortunately, students with disabilities often experience challenges or barriers that interfere with their ability to access and demonstrate learning. Barriers to learning can be associated with the way information is presented, example are text and lecture. Second is the way the student is required to respond. Examples are writing and speech. The characteristic of setting. Example are noise and lighting. The last is the timing and scheduling of instructions. Example are time of the day and the length of the assignment. What are accommodation? Teachers can address these barriers by providing students with accommodation. Adaptations or changes in educational environment or practices that help students overcome the barriers presented by their disability. The term accommodation may be used to describe an alteration of environment, curriculum format, or equipment that allows an individual with a disability to gain access to the content with or complete assigned tasks. They allow students with disability to pursue a regular course of study. Two areas in which accommodation can be used are instructions and testing. Instructional accommodations are changes to the delivery of classroom instructions or the accompanying materials. Instructional accommodations change how students learn but do not change what they learn. In other words, they do not change the scope or range of the grade level content standards. Nor do they alter the complexity of the knowledge students are expected to learn. Students with disabilities who use instructional accommodations are required to learn the same content at the same level of proficiency as their peers who do not use instructional accommodations. One of the ways to increase students' access to academic content standards through instruction in the general curriculum is by using instructional accommodation. Accommodations are changes in the way a student accesses learning, without changing the actual standards a student is working towards. Using accommodation can be complicated. The goal is to find a balance that gives students equal access to learning without watering down the content. This accommodation for assessment and instruction are integrally intertwined. There are some accommodations that are appropriate for classroom use that would not be appropriate in testing situations. However, no accommodation should be recommended for an assessment that a student has not had a thorough opportunity to learn to use an effective way and comfortably during classroom activities. Testing accommodations are changes to the format of a test or its administration procedures. Testing accommodations are changes to the format of a test or its administration procedures. Testing accommodations changes how students are tested, but do not change what a test measures. Commonly used testing accommodation include having the test read aloud, allowing for extended time, permitting scribbles or dictations, and giving the test in a small group setting. The following are a few representative testing accommodations made for students with disabilities. Students may have test instructions clarified by a teacher or test administrator. Tests may be presented in a different format, such as in large-sized font, or by being read to students by text-to-speech software. Test accommodations are often given to students with disabilities as one means of removing construct irrelevant barriers to proper measurement of their knowledge, skills, and abilities. Whether for instruction or testing, accommodation provides students with opportunities to achieve the same outcome and to obtain the same benefits as students without disabilities. By addressing barriers, accommodation creates better access to learning opportunities for students with disabilities. For some students, these barriers can be simple to address. For example, a student who has difficulty with fine motor skills and struggles to hold a pencil may require a pencil grip to help her write out her responses. For others, addressing the barrier can be more complex. For instance, a student who has a visual disability and cannot access written materials might require braille materials. To better understand the accommodation can address barriers presented by a student's disability, here are some examples. Visual disability is a term experts use to describe any kind of visual loss, whether it's someone who cannot see at all or someone who has partial vision loss. Some people are completely blind, but many people have what's called legal blindness. The main barrier of this disability is reading printed tasks, and the accommodations are audio version of the text, large printed material, and braille material. Disability category number 2. A specific learning disability or SLD is a specific impairment of academic learning that interferes with the specific aspect of schoolwork and that reduces a student's academic performance significantly. This disability category is ADHD, or known as Attentive Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is a chronic condition that affects millions of children and often continues to adulthood. Main barrier is remaining focused, and the accommodations are allow frequent breaks and marks answered directly in a booklet or on a bubble answer sheet for them to learn the questions or lessons. Number 4. Disability category is orthopedic impairment. The referral characteristic for the student with an orthopedic impairment fall more into the area of physical characteristic. This may include paralysis, unsteady gait, poor muscle control, loss of limb, and etc. An orthopedic impairment may also impede speech production and the expressive language of the child. Main barrier is writing out responses, and the accommodations are permit oral response and speech-to-text software. Accommodation provides support that allows students with disability to achieve the same instructional goals as students without disabilities. It's important to note that accommodations do not change the expectation for learning. Number 2, do not reduce the requirements of the tasks. Number 3, do not change what the students is required to learn. Teachers should provide accommodations that meet the unique needs of each individual student. Not all students with the same disability, or even those who experience the same barrier, will benefit from the same accommodation. For example, not all students with visual impairment will benefit from braille material. Some might be better served with audiobooks. It is not common misconceptions that accommodations offer an unfair advantage to students with disabilities. Used appropriately, accommodations level the playing field, allowing students with disabilities the opportunity to perform tasks as well as students without disabilities.
So hi guys, I am Ranel Itoto and I am your last virtual teacher for tonight. My discussion for tonight is about accommodation and I hope you are going to listen and gain something about it. Instructional practices often confused with accommodations. So accordingly, teachers use a number of instructional practices to improve their students' learning. It is not unusual for several of these, specifically modifications, instructional strategies, and interventions, to be confused with accommodations. So today, in my discussions, I'm gonna describe each of these practices and explain what makes them different from accommodations. So let's start with modifications. Modifications, accordingly, are adaptations that change what students learn and are used with the students who require more support or adjustments than accommodations can provide. Whereas, accommodations level the playing field, while modification change the playing field. So, to put it simply, an accommodation changes how a student learns the material, while a modification changes what a student is taught or expected to learn. So, unlike accommodations, modifications, first, it changes the expectations for learning, and second, it reduces the requirements of the task. So, Sir Ranel, can you give us an example of a student who has a disability that we can apply the modification? So, no problem guys, I have here the table and we are going to see if what we can do to modify the learning of the students who has a disability.
This table shows a disability category of 4, namely, visual disability, specific learning disability, ADHD, and orthopedic impairment. These disabilities has different barriers and each has different modifications. For the first disability, alternating the assignment is the best accommodation. Since the student has difficulty in reading printed text and so on, that is how modifications work. Doesn't only focus on barrier but looking for a way to address these barriers.
So the next topic is the instructional strategy or intervention. Another way teachers often help struggling students is to implement an instructional intervention or strategy, both of which involve teaching the students to work through a series of steps to improve in an area of deficit or remediate a certain set of skills. Unlike accommodations, strategies or interventions do not specifically address the barriers presented by a student's disability. Rather, they address a skill or knowledge deficit. So, how does intervention differs to accommodations, Sir Ranel? So, accordingly, di ba, interventions do not actually specifically address the barrier. Instead, it focuses more on how to develop something deficit to a student or a skill. For example, if the student is not really good at reading comprehension, there might be an intervention that could help a student to improve on his or her reading comprehension. That's how interventions work. So to help us understand more, the table here has a list of a few areas in which students often struggle and contrast example instructional interventions or strategies with examples of accommodations that might be used to help students be successful in class.
The example of area of deficit here is about the reading comprehension, mathematics computation, and regulating behavior. Reading comprehension has an example instructional intervention of collaborative strategic reading or CSR, and the example accommodations here is first, visual cues, like color coding key information. Second is digital text that provides definitions, and the last one is alternating formats like diagrams, pictures, and hands-on activities, and so on.
So teachers might believe that if they are already using differentiated instruction or universal design for learning or UDL, they do not need to provide accommodations for students with disabilities. Although these approaches might meet the needs of many, some students with disabilities will require the further support or services that accommodations can offer. So, guys, as a pre-service teacher, we should not limit ourselves on how we can be able to help the students to learn and be successful in class. We should always find ways on helping them because it's for their future that we are trying to build. So to help us understand more about accommodations, I have here an example scenario about Liam. So let's try to understand and let's see if we can have a better accommodations for him. So let's consider Liam. Each day, Liam's science teacher devotes the first portion of the period to independently reading a section of textbook before discussing it with the class as a group. Recall that Liam has difficulty finishing science reading assignments in class in the allotted time due to his difficulty reading standard print materials. Follow along as the teacher evaluates the effectiveness of the selected accommodation, a digital textbook that allows him to enlarge the text. So let's see if how we are going to accommodate Liam's problem.
Step 1. Determine how to measure the expected outcome. Liam will record the number of pages he reads in the allotted time each day and the number of pages assigned. Step 2. Collect baseline data before providing a digital textbook of the science text, Liam records a number of pages of the assignment he reads each day over the course of 5 days. Step 3. Collect implementation data. After introducing the accommodation, Liam records a number of pages of the assignment he completes for 5 days. Step 4. Compare implementation data to the baseline data. To determine whether the accommodation was effective, the teacher and Liam graph the data. When they compare Liam's baseline and implementation data, she determines that the accommodation has had a positive effect on Liam's performance. In this table, we can see that Liam have improved from pre-accommodations and post-accommodations. Therefore, the said accommodations done is effective.